Good morning, everyone. Beverly Owens, the budget analyst for environmental services. Happy to support Sanjay in this great training we have today.
Awesome. Thanks, Beverly. So Beverly and I are going to be your key presenters today. If you have any questions, we last last budget training we actually had little like chunks where there were time for questions, and it actually ended up pushing our meeting really long. And so I'm going to actually ask that you wait, write your questions down like by yourself, and then ask them at the end because even throwing them in the chat, they can get a little lost in in the history and whatnot. And so please feel free to write your questions down, hold them off until the end, and then we can circle back and answer anything you need and go back to different slides as you need as well. So I really hope you do enjoy this training and it is helpful for you. Okay, so we are going to be talking about encumbrances, earmarks, and liquidations. Beverly's going to go through that. We're going to talk about them at kind of a high level. Actually, that the pieces that they cover in terms of POs and ACs is actually there's a fiscal team training, and that's something I wanted to kind of make clear at the beginning of this training that there is a line, a pretty thick line between the budget team and the fiscal team. So the budget team kind of says like where money should be spent, and then the fiscal teams kind of says where how money should be spent, or like where like the technical pieces of how it all kind of like is spent. And so those are kind of the two little distinctions you have over there between the budget team and the fiscal team. And so there is some overlap that we do well with the fiscal team, but those pieces are actually pretty distinct. And a lot of what happens with POs, purchase orders, and agreement contracts, some of those nit grit details, we're not going to go into it too specific a level today, but we are going to cover at a high level in what pertains to the budget team specifically. So we'll be covering that. We'll talk through what an encumbrance is, what an earmark is, and what liquidations are. We're going to be talking through budget trackers. And the reason why we include budget trackers in this training is really to help you as program staff and administrative staff and support staff understand how we think, how we see budget, how we view kind of the story that's happening in ESD. All of those pieces are really integral to being able to accurately support ESD in their budgetary functions. And so we include not only the purpose for our budget trackers and things that we sent out to you guys and also things that we're looking at as well, but also how it works, right? And like what we're doing on the back end to really understand kind of where the flow of money is going and how things are kind of piecing together. And again, we're not going to go into again the nitty gritty, how we pull reports from specific financial management systems and how how we use Excel, right? But we are going to talk about kind of the whys of it all and a little bit of the hows. We're also going to be talking about clearance accounts. Clearance accounts are a really important piece, especially for ESD. Every single department in the in City of San Jose has clearance accounts, but for ESD specifically, there's a very specific purpose and how it works that we're going to be discussing in our training today. So, with all that said, I'm going to hand it off to Beverly to kick us off today.
Thank you, Sanjay. So coming up on our first slide here, we're just going to cover some definitions right away. I'll just read the first one. An encumbrance is a budget authority that is set aside when a purchase order is or contract is approved. The encumbrance assures suppliers that sufficient funds will be available once the order is fulfilled. Encumbrances are also known as obligations. A little bit more on that. So basically, we're saying after you create a purchase order, open purchase order, or AC, funding is encumbered, thereby setting aside the amount necessary to meet the obligations of the purchase order or contract. In FMS, the encumbered funds are attached to a PO, OP, or AC and only used for that project. Looking at our second bullet now, an earmark is a monetary commitment within an organization to use funds for a specific purpose at a future point in time. So a little more on that. Folks often talk of saving funds for a specific use. However, unless the funds are indeed encumbered, they are not set aside for a specific use and can be used for other expenditures. Basically, once a contract is awarded, the contract manager must save or earmark the funding awarded for that contract and use trackers to ensure that the earmarked funds are not used for other purchases. Often contracts are awarded, but the step of encumbering cannot happen yet. Maybe the project went out to bid and did not receive any bids. During the delay between award and encumber, the necessary funding must be earmarked. Our last bullet here on the screen for you. A liquidation is money which is removed from an encumbrance. So it can be used to pay an invoice, can be used to simply lower the encumbrance and free up the money for other uses. A little more on that. Using funds to pay for an invoice is liquidating. Unencumbering or simply removing funding no longer needed on an AC or OP are both examples of liquidation. Approximately twice a year, department-wide liquidations are rounded up. At the same time, prompt liquidation of unused funding ensures department trackers are up to date and funds are available for other uses. We encourage folks not to hoard funds. Having an extra cushion by encumbering extra or leaving an encumbrance just in case is not advised. It just leads to inaccurate tracking. Just nice to stay on top of that. Before we leave the slide, I do have a small example. It's simple, but its simplicity actually makes it easy to understand in the Ariza story. Let's say you have $100 in a fund and you want to run a lemonade stand that requires $75. Earmarking is when you put that $75 into your purse and you get ready to go to the bank. Encumbrance is when you encumber that $75 to the contract, which is linked to the lemonade stand. Liquidation is when you pay an invoice for supplies like lemons. If you did not use all of the encumbrance to pay for the project, you can liquidate any remaining balance. This frees up the funds to be used for other purposes. If lemons were on sale, your expenses would be less than expected, and you could liquidate the savings to use for other projects. And that's our basic definitions of these three. Next slide, please. So this is just to go a little bit more detail about each of these, the contracts, purchase orders, and open purchase orders, starting with your basic AC or contract, always staying on that last slide still. Thank you. An AC or a contract is mostly used for projects involving services with contractors and is used for capital projects, which are new developments. There are two uses for the term contracts. The Giles contract is called contract, and the AC is called a contract. These two work together like partners, and both are necessary for executing a contract. The Giles contract is between the City of San Jose and the vendor, and the AC is created to encumber the funding and track the payments to the vendor. Physical creates and shares the AC number after the Giles contract has been recorded. After the AC is created, the funding can be encumbered. Each of these steps takes time, so you want to make sure your AC is encumbered before your invoices start coming in. The second bullet, purchase order, a little more on that. Purchase order is used to procure goods when you know the exact cost of the item or items you need to buy. It is a one-time purchase. The vendor provides a quote, a purchase requisition form is submitted to physical, and a purchase order is created. Once the goods are delivered, an invoice is received that matches the quote. Paying the invoice closes the OP since the balance is zero after the one-time purchase. That will help us distinguish between the last bullet, which is an open purchase order. This is a specific term, open purchase orders is used for a specific term, that's a period of time, where the amount we encumber is an estimate. Open purchase orders are used for operations and maintenance projects. A good example is in water resources, where there are many types of repairs to this system that delivers water to customers. each year, over 50 open purchase orders are managed to ensure various vendors and supplies are available for repairs that fiscal year. As needed, we can use the open purchase orders to make repairs, and every year the open purchase orders are renewed such that another year of services and estimated encumbrances are set up and ready to maintain our system. Next slide, please. So our last high-level look here at the definition of your purchase orders and contracts, an agreement set up between the city and a vendor to procure goods and services up to a not to exceed limit within a predetermined scope of time. So a good point to mention here is the need to manage any contracts. The not to exceed limit within a predetermined scope of time requires any contracts or service orders be completed within the term of the service order and not exceed the maximum amount of the contract. Any changes require an amendment to the contract, including reclaiming unspent funds. Keep in mind, the liquidated funds will return to the fiscal year they were encumbered from. Liquidating contracts as portions are completed will help return the funding within the fiscal year it was encumbered, thereby making funds available for other uses within a calendar year. And that's what I have for you today. I'm going to send it back to Sanjay, and thank you.
Thanks so much, Beverly. That example of the lemonade stand was fantastic. I really appreciate that example, and she's exactly right. And those distinctions, specifically between an encumbrance and an earmark, was really well described over there. And again, if you want any more clarity on that, please feel free to write down that question, and we can redescribe. I'm going to use that lemonade stand example going forward. That's a fantastic example. So really appreciate your presentation of that there, Beverly. Okay, so now we're going to transition to where we as the budget team see our information for our encumbrances and our liquidations, our overall contracts. There's a couple different places we look, but a big place, ooh, I think someone might have their mic on, so please make sure you're muted. A big place that we look, and one of the first places we look, is something called the remaining balance report. So the remaining balance report is a cumulative report that summarized status of current encumbrances across the city. And so it shows everything that we've got currently. Now, one thing that you'll notice when we kind of share share the example of our RBR is that there might be some things that are out of date. There might be historic information that's maybe a little confusing. When we go into our financial management system, FMS, we can see the full history of the contract or the vendor or whoever we're looking at, and that will give us a more specific and detailed kind of layout about where things are. However, the RBR is our kind of first look at seeing where things are, and it is a benefit to us provided by Finance GL to help us kind of organize and try to keep close track on our encumbrances. What's included in the remaining balance report is a beginning date of contract, so when the contract was initially encumbered, an end date of the contract. And one thing you'll notice sometimes is that some contracts won't have an end date. They'll just have like 0000. And we'll show you kind of what I mean by that in our example. However, the reason that they may not have an end date is because they are an AC. And so that is a contract expanding over multiple years. And so until like the year of expiration for the contract comes up, you won't see that date. But for off-cycle POs and POs that are encumbered within a given year that have an end date that's very clearly marked out, that will show up, but the ACs will look like they are continually ongoing, and we'll talk about some of the impacts of that later on as well. It'll have the last activity date of the contract, so anytime money was liquidated from or encumbered to, or an adjustment was made to the contract, that will show up in the RBR as well. they'll have encumbrance adjustments. So if there needed to be more money encumbered to the contract or to the line, that to be able to pay an invoice, or maybe money needed to be liquidated to pay an invoice, all of those adjustments will also show up in the RBR. It'll have a total year-to-date liquidations. So like it have a total kind of adjustments and total year-to-date liquidations, how much has been taken out of the contract to be able to pay for things, total current balance, line number for the encumbrance. Now, this is really important. Every encumbrance could have multiple lines, sometimes even up to like 40 or 50 lines. Some encumbrances have like 1 to 2 lines. Others have like, 40 to 50 lines. It just depends on the contract and who's using it. Usually, line numbers are indicative of who is using the encumbrance and how much of the total contract has been portioned out and encumbered to that team. And so this is kind of where the overlap from our previous training comes in, because the line number is connected specifically to a viz code. And so if you guys don't remember what the viz codes were, they're visible codes that the city uses to actually make the purchases. So they're like 15-digit numbers that are portioned out in a very specific way. And those numbers are kind of like GPS coordinate systems, and they tell you which team is using it and which and for what it's being used for. So for the last 4 digits of that number, we'll say if it's supplies and materials, if it's contractual services, whatever the detail may be, that will show up on the line number for the encumbrance will be connected to a specific viz code, and that'll show you the team and the purpose for that line number. And again, we will discuss that further if there are any questions. But in a given contract, the point that I'm making here is that you could have multiple lines in a given contract, so multiple people can be using the contract. And finally, it has year-end processes that were executed. And so kind of like when a contract was like fully liquidated, or when it was no longer kind of in play anymore, or a line was liquidated or no longer in play anymore, those will show up on the RBR as well, and it'll show like the line number zeroed out, and it'll show kind of the date that it was liquidated. So again, the problem with this report is that it is really busy. There's a lot of information on it, and it's built for us. We don't actually build these reports. They're built for us by the finance department. They send it to us. And we have constantly kind of been at a place where we're trying to identify different issues where it's like, hey, we're noticing this is still in here. It's not lining up with what we know to be true in FMS. And so we'll send those issues over to them. And sometimes they can be pretty big, where we're seeing like, a good amount of like lines or an encumbrance that shouldn't be there anymore, that is still there, or that they're in the wrong place. And we'll try to send those in as we find them to get help finance to reconcile this report. But that's kind of how this report works. So now that I've explained it to you, let me show it to you because it is really busy. So this is a snapshot of kind of what the report looks like. And this isn't even everything, right? Like if you look over here on the first column, you've got the department name. That's got that the report has every department in the city. So you can look up like, contracts for every single department in the city. It's got the fund that it's connected to, the viz code it's connected to, whether it's an AC, PO, or OPO, as Beverly was talking about there, what the encumbrance number is of the AC, PO, or OPO, what line number it is, the vendor number. So this is pretty important here that we recognize the vendor number is different than the encumbrance number. A vendor can have multiple encumbrances that are linked to it. And so, but like an encumbrance number is specific to a given vendor. Now, Beverly also very astutely mentioned Giles. So Giles is another part of the contract process. When a contract is executed, before it shows up in FMS, it shows up in a place called Giles, which is a centralized database for contracts with the city. And so it flows through Giles and then into FMS. And so this report is when it's already in FMS with an assigned encumbrance number attached to it. This is the vendor name over here. This line is the original amount that was encumbered to the line. And so this is a good example here, this second line over here. So the city manager using this Viz code executed this contract with Trentech, which is a consultant firm that kind of we use for part-time workers. And the original amount was $2,000. However, they made an adjustment of $23,000 that they added to this line so that they could procure services. So the total encumbrance, this column's the total encumbrance was 25,000 because it's that 2,000 plus the 23,000. Now check this out. They liquidated $24,650, and so they have a balance of 350. So what they did was they made sure they had enough money because they knew invoices were coming that they needed to pay for Trentech, and they were ready with that total encumbrance of 25,000 to liquidate 24,650 to be able to pay for those invoices. Now, here's another interesting point. We see that the original encumbrance date over here was January of 2024. The last activity date was June 30th of 2025. And this date over here, this is it's called my screen cut it off over here, but I'm sorry about that. But this is the date that is going to be the expiration date. And that is also June 30th, 2025. So they handled this really well because they made sure that they did the last payout for this contract at the same time that the contract expired. And so this is now a done deal. It's good to go. And so it's likely, maybe in the next couple months that this will maybe, be taken off the RBR because it's no longer valid. Sometimes it stays on there for a while though. So that's an example of how the RBR works and kind of the different pieces that it is portraying. So all that being said, right now we are going to take a quick minute and I'm going to give you guys a good like 15 minutes to actually do this activity. We're going to do an activity. I'm going to break you guys into groups, and we're going to do an activity called Pay Your Invoice. Now, when you signed up for the training, Gabriella should have sent a PowerPoint. She did send a PowerPoint and a Word doc. That Word doc is the exercise. And so it's titled Pay Your Invoice, and it has some questions and it kind of walks you through some steps. And we're going to break up into groups and try to answer those questions. And then it's in the calendar invite. Thank you, Gabriella. And then I'll bring us back in about 15, maybe even 20 minutes. Because I was told last training that a little more time for the exercise might be helpful. So I'm going to give a little more time to kind of try to figure this out on our own. Then we'll come back together and we'll answer the questions together. So let me break us out. Let me just check the chat real quick to see if there's right. Okay, so the RBR is showing this line item. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, we're good to go. Cool. So the RBR is showing this line item for a PO with Granger below. And so the first question is, you have an invoice that you need to pay out of Fund 570. Which line number of the encumbrance should you use? And let's start with group number one. Anthony, would you be able to share your answer with us?
Yeah, sure. It's letter C, line 3.
Awesome. Excellent job. So the answer is letter C, line 3. As you see here, Fund 570 is linked to line 3 of the contract. And so that is the one that we want to use, line 3. Okay, number 2. This is the last invoice you need to pay as the contract is expiring this year out of this line of the contract, and it's $2,500. The invoice is $2,500. Should you A, encumber 2,500 in partnership with fiscal staff, B, earmark 2,500 and inform your budget analyst, C, coordinate with your budget analyst to liquidate 2,500 to pay the invoice, or D, liquidate $5,000 and coordinate with fiscal staff? And let's go to room 2. Janice, would you like to share your answer with us?
I didn't actually have that. I had what is it, line 423, but I went ahead with my group.
Go ahead.
And I selected C also, which is liquidate the 2,500 and coordinate and reach out to your budget analyst about the status of
That's
that line.
fantastic. Yeah, Riley actually told me that there were some folks that were still working off of the old one that we had sent out. I updated
Right.
it at the last minute, so my apologies for that. That's my fault, and that's on me.
No
Gabriella was
worries.
really quick to send out the new one, and but we just thought we were thinking it through. And we wanted it to be more current. So like the line that you're looking at there, Janice, is actually from an old RBR, like from last year. And so we just wanted to update it and update some of the questions as well. And so that's why we sent out a new one. But really appreciate you kind of rolling with your team there. And you are correct. You want to coordinate with your budget analyst to liquidate the 2,500. And I want to just walk through these answers because it can kind of throw people a little bit. Let me just ask this question. Did anyone get I'll just say it like this. If you got a different answer, let me explain why this is the answer. So if you went forward and encumbered 2,500 in partnership with fiscal staff, you could do it, you know, but you wouldn't actually be paying your invoice. You would be adding more to the contract to be able to maybe pay more invoices or something like that. Like the 2,500 for the invoice, encumbering more to the contract wouldn't pay that invoice. And so that would not be the right answer. Earmarking 2,500 means that you know in your head that, like, you know, further down the line you're going to have to pay an invoice of $2,500. And so that means that you are looking at your expenses and saying, okay, I need to save 2,500. I'm not ready to encumber yet. The bid hasn't gone out yet. So because the bid's already gone out, the contract's been established, you've got money already encumbered, and now you have an invoice to pay 2,500, you would not want to earmark 2,500 because this is the last invoice of the year that you need to pay, and the contract is about to expire this year. Now, here's the trick one. Liquidate $5,000 and coordinate with fiscal staff. The reason that's kind of a trick question, because right now you see that there is an adjustment here for $5,000, and so you have a total encumbrance on this line of $5,000. The reason that's a trick question is because you really want to make sure that you are coordinating with your budget analyst for like what the next steps are for each one of these steps. So right now, all you need to do is pay that invoice of $2,500. So you don't want to just liquidate everything, right? You want to talk with your budget office and say, okay, I got this $2,500 invoice to pay. The contract's about to expire. You know, like, I think I need to liquidate, you know, this 2,500 to be able to pay this invoice. Is that the correct kind of, you know, mode of operations? And so that really is it. You don't want to just jump the gun because you're done. You want to really kind of get the conversation going and make sure things are where they need to be able to execute your functions. Okay. Number 3, what is your, sorry, I put the answer on there. So what is your balance of the line after paying your invoice? Room 3, let's go with Beverly Chen over there.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
This is for number 3, right?
Number 3, correct.
Okay, we put 2,500.
Awesome. Yes. And so after you have liquidated the money from the contract and from the line specifically and paid your invoice, the balance would be $2,500 that's left over. And that's excellent. Okay. So now, question number 4. I don't know why this E is there. That shouldn't be there. Question number 4. What are the next steps? A, do nothing. You've paid your invoice. The job is done. B, inform your budget analyst that no more invoices are needed and request to have the encumbrance liquidated. C, encumber more funds to the contract. Or D, earmark more funds to the contract. And let's go with room 4, and let's go with Nikita.
Yeah, the answer is B, inform your budget analyst that no more invoices are needed.
Excellent job. Excellent job. So right, if you do nothing and you just paid your invoice and it's all done, you're still, you know that the contract is expiring this year. It is on you to, as the program staff and the contract manager, to recognize that and to say, hey, I think my contract is ending, like Mr. Budget Analyst or Mrs. Budget Analyst, do you know kind of what the next steps are? Should I liquidate? Because something we can run into is money can sit encumbered in an expired contract without us realizing it. And then it's just taking up space, really. And where it should have fallen to something called ending fund balance, it just kind of sits loaded in an expired encumbrance. And that doesn't give a true statement of kind of where things are in ESD. And that's part of a big process of what we do here with our budget team. And I'm going to be talking about that next when I talk about budget trackers. But it's absolutely right that when you are seeing that a contract is ending, you're paying your last invoice out of it, inform your budget analyst that no more invoices are needed. You know that there's nothing more that's coming down the pipe, and request to have the encumbrance liquidated, or talk to them about it. Just be like, hey, is this the correct next steps over here? So I hope that was really clear, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And then I'm going to reshare it. From current slide. Okay. And then I'm going to share. I want to share this screen. Okay. Can you guys all see the PowerPoint screen there? Yeah.
We're seeing both of them. Like,
Oh,
yeah, there it goes.
okay. We're good?
Yeah,
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Gabriella.
thank you.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to be talking about today is budget trackers and clearance accounts. And budget trackers, I really feel are one of the most important things that I personally like kind of bank on. As the senior budget analyst, I look to them a lot. I kind of circle back to them. They help us kind of plan as different things happen throughout the year. They're a management tool. They give us, actuals when we're trying to figure out, how much money is left in different areas. Budget trackers are really important. They're like, I want to say they're like, 40% of the overall job that we do, because of how impactful they are in our day-to-day decisions and our long-term decisions. So what we're going to be talking about today is how we build them, how you use them, and different cycles for review. So before I actually share an example and talk through how you use them, I want to talk about how we build them. So how we build them is we take raw aggregate data, like it's data that kind of looks like that RBR. When we pull it from our financial management system, it looks like just a bunch of numbers, and it's got a bunch of rows and a bunch of columns, and it's just a big hot mess. And, people say, wow, you're a senior budget analyst. You must be really good at math. I am not good at math. I am good at Excel. I excel at Excel. And a lot of Beverly's actually very good at math. A lot of our other analysts are good at math, but I personally am not good at math, but I am good at Excel. And we use Excel to build our budget trackers. And the goal of the budget trackers and how we're building them is to be able to tell you a simplistic story using all that massive amount of data. So sometimes, those raw data spreadsheets can be like, 700,000 lines. It would be absolutely terrible if you asked me, hey, Sanjay, how much do I have in my little, in my team for this month? How much is remaining in my team? And I just sent you that raw data. Like, and you would have to kind of like sort through and figure it out for yourself. That would just be so ridiculous. That wouldn't be providing that world-class service that we're talking about in ESD. So we build them in a way to make it simple for you, as simple as we can get it, to be able to like understand where your budget is, understand how much has been spent, how much is encumbered, and then what your balance is. And that distinction between how much is spent and how much is encumbered is also a very important piece. As we were talking about before, you can either, earmark funds, which that they are monies that are going to be encumbered, but they haven't been encumbered yet. You can encumber funds, which now they are locked to a specific contract, or you can liquidate funds so that they can pay an invoice. So when we're talking about expenses, that's really like the liquidated funds that are paying the invoice. Encumbrance are encumbrances, and earmarks actually reside in the balance, right? So when you have loose money, that's money that can be earmarked for specific services. And again, we'll show you the example so you can see a good example of a tracker and kind of how it's built. But that is how we build them, to be able to be a functional resource for you to understand kind of the story of your team from a financial perspective. How you use them is to be able to kind of drill down into details as well as look at the high level picture. So you can, our trackers are built in such a way that you can see like even percentages, like, okay, I'm about halfway through the year, but I've spent 70% of my budget. So the rest of this year, I actually got to be a little careful with like what I expect to do, right? So like our fiscal year is from July to June. January is like dead center in the middle. And if by January let's say that you had $100,000 in your budget, and if by January you've already spent $75,000 for that January to June, you've only got 25,000 left to spend. And so we help you understand like those pieces and where you are. And I know even just saying that, some of you are like, oh, I never want to be in that position, but it can happen, and that's okay. And we work with you to be able to build these trackers so that you can understand at a high level what your overall budget looks like, and at a detail level where the big spending pieces are. So let's say that 1 year out of that $100,000 you just had a massive amount of supplies that you needed to re-up for your team, right? And that costs like $50,000 out of the $75,000. And so, and maybe like the rest of that 25,000 was just in like one encumbrance and professional consultant services. So then detail 4030 would have like $50,000 of in it by January, and then detail 4052 would have $25,000. And so that is a good data point that helps you understand where your spending has been throughout the year and how you can spend going forward. It's also helpful to use in dealing with proposals. So when you are thinking through writing proposals for different scopes of services that you want to see executed in future years, or different programs that you want to get started, one of the things that we look at is kind of like what our overall spending is. And so one of the first things the budget office will ask us when we submit our proposals is there savings enough to cover this service? So like, let's say that you have that $100,000 budget. Let's say now that you've only spent $10,000 in the whole year, and you've been doing that consistently for like the last 5 years, and you've just got this whole $100,000 budget. And let's say that because you've only spent 10,000, let's say this year you start writing a $30,000 proposal. That seems like a lot of money compared to that 10,000 that you've been spending every one of those years. However, in the course of your overall budget, you actually have savings for that $30,000. So it's very likely that the budget office you'd get pushback on a proposal like that because you have savings. Budget trackers help you understand those details and help you understand, what you need to do to help bolster a proposal, to help get it over the line, to help add more budget to your team, or, like what you can do like within the budget that you have for like new scopes of services that you want to see go forward. So all of those different pieces are how you can use the budget trackers and different cycles that we have for review. Specifically, I talked about proposal cycle, but it's also useful in looking at our mid-year cycle, our base budget, our year-end cycle, and our annual report cycle. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what those things are and how we look at those things, but just to give a quick overview of them, and by way of example, right now we are closing out last fiscal year and starting this fiscal year. So we are doing our annual report cycle and our base budget cycle kind of around the same time period. And so those two cycles, we need budget trackers to be able to execute those two cycles. So for example, one of the functions of annual report is a last final ditch effort to re-budget funds that were not used in fiscal year 24-25 into 25-26. Now, let's say that in May, when we did our first round of rebudgets, that there was, maybe invoices that you thought were still going to come in that last year, and you weren't sure how much you were going to rebudget. And let's say that you had a $50,000 left of your $100,000 budget. You paid those invoices, and now you have $30,000 left of your, overall $100,000 budget. And so at annual report is another chance to rebudget those funds. But how you use budget trackers to do that is you can look and see that you do indeed have that $30,000. Because let's say that you ask for $30,000, but you actually have like $27,000 because it was just like a little bit over. The last invoices were a little bit over. Budget trackers will help you actually rebudget the actual amount that you need. And that's how we use them. That's how we build them. And that's how we want you to use them as well. And so that being said, we are going to show you kind of what a budget tracker looks like, one of the budget trackers that we use. Each team and each analyst has their own style of budget trackers, right? So the way I build budget trackers, the way Beverly builds budget trackers, Jenna Zarbis, Renato Moreno, all of us have different styles and they're all fantastic. We're all really good at building budget trackers, if I say so myself. But if you have something different that you want in a budget tracker, you are more than welcome to talk to us about it. And we're here to serve you. We're here to support you. And if you're like, hey, I just want to be able to see this, can you just give this to me? We can probably do it. So just communicate with us and we can, basically manipulate and mold budget trackers to fit how you want to view your budget so that you can best use it. So here's an example of a budget tracker. So this is the budget tracker that we actually use for the regional wastewater facility. And it shows you over here the different high-level teams of the regional wastewater facility. So you got admin support, operations, energy and automation, and maintenance. Now, we know that there's a ton more teams that are at the regional wastewater facility, but they all kind of fall under these 4 canopies. And so we show the overall budget based on these 4 canopies. And you see here, we have our total budget, we have our current month expenditure, our year-to-date expenditure for the year, our year-to-date encumbrance, our total encumbrance, and our balance, which is our total budget minus our total expense and encumbrance. Total budget minus total expense and encumbrance gives you your balance. Over here, you got kind of a percentage breakout and forecasting of where we expect the year to land. And so, for example, for the admin and support services group, this is personal services that we're looking at over here. We expect the year to land based on forecast methodology, and I'm going to talk to that in just a second here. But based on forecast methodology, even though we have only spent 2.9 million, we actually expect the year to end at 3.1 million. And that we are guessing that we'll have about $456,000 in savings, which is very good. It is not good to have too much savings, and it's not good to have too little savings. And this, being at 87% because of our vacancy rate, kind of tracks with what we're seeing in terms of our savings and what we've been in our expenditures versus what we've been budgeted. So there are 2 types of forecasting methodology. So this number is not arbitrary. It comes from somewhere. There are 2 types of forecasting methodologies. One is called a straight line forecast, where basically we take your average monthly spend over the course of, several months, and then we extend it out to say, okay, this is where we expect to land. So if you, let's say you spent $5 one month, $6 the second month, and $4 the next month. So that shows an average of $5 a month. That means by the end of the year, you'll spend $60, right? So it's just kind of taking the average and extending it out. So that is kind of a baseline, what's called straight line forecast method that we use to help forecast expenditures. Another method that we have is what's called the the personal services account pay period close, accounting pay period close forecast methodology. I use it all the time, but actually remembering the name of it, yeah, it's a pay period close accounting pay period close forecast methodology. And what that is essentially we take the overall percentage that finance is giving us in terms of the amount of pay periods that are happening in a year, and we use that number to forecast these personal services costs. And so for the second one, it's only kind of used for personal services. For the first one, you can use it for personal services or for non-personal. In some cases, you know, at our discretion and based on the different kind of pressure points, we choose to use one over the other. But I just wanted to kind of share those two methodologies that we have for making these estimates about where you're going to land. And I think pretty much every budget tracker, save for a few, have these forecasting pieces involved in it. So we can say, hey, it looks like you're going to be over budget this year. Is there anything that you need to do to kind of like reconcile that? Or how can we kind of support you in getting you to where you land, you know, where you need to be? Do you need more money? Do we need to ask for a mid-year adjustment? Stuff like that. All of those pieces are why we use forecasting and why we build them into our trackers. There are some trackers that don't have forecasting methodologies, and that's simply because the program staff have just asked, like, hey, I don't really need that. My budget's good. I just want to know where my balance is, and that's all I need, and that's fine. If whatever you need to best make your decisions as program staff, we want to be there to support that. So please do communicate with your budget analysts on those pieces. So again, we have the 4 kind of high-level breakouts. We've got budget, current expense, year-to-date expense, year-to-date encumbrance, total expense and encumbrance, balance, and then forecast. And then on the next page over here, there you go. So this is where we're getting into some more of the nits and grits details. So this specific tracker actually breaks out. So like if you go back one, you'll see that this is one of the 4 pieces we got over here. And you see they're actually broken out in the tabs as well. So this is created by Jenna Zarbas. She's very organized. And so she's creating different tabs for each of those different teams. And so this is the administration and support services tab. And these are the different pieces of that tab, the different teams within that tab. And what she's done is if you basically were to minimize or drop down one of these pieces, you would see all the different areas that the WPCP admin is spending in. So in supplies and materials, they had a budget of $31,000. And at the end of the year, they had a balance of $1,700, so on and so forth. So you can see it for each of the lines. And so again, if you're looking at this and you're like, wow, this is something that I really need for my team, please let your division analyst know and we can create it specifically for you. There should be trackers out currently for your different teams. And so like, please do check them out. They're really helpful in giving you kind of a very clear picture about kind of where things are, what's going on, and how you can plan for your you know, the future proposals, how you can plan for your spending throughout the year, and how they align with your overall scope of services that you're providing for ESD. So that's budget trackers. Budget trackers, again, you know, it's like, it literally is like 40 to 50% of our job is updating budget trackers, studying budget trackers, using budget trackers to communicate to staff and leadership about different pieces that are coming up. It's a really effective tool. And the more comfortable that you as program staff get at looking at these budget trackers, like the easier all of our jobs are going to be. So I'd encourage you, it may look a little intimidating, but I'd encourage you to actually ask your division analyst, or feel free to even just come to me like, hey, I'm seeing this on my budget tracker. I don't get it. Can you just explain this like 4 more times? And I'm going to be like, put it on my calendar. But yeah, feel free to come to us because we would love to talk through it with you and really get you to a place where you can look at these trackers and be like, yes, I understand what's going on, and I want to, and I'm tracking with it, pun intended. Okay, we are going to move on from here to the clearance accounts. All right, so this is a really important part about ESD. ESD is what we call a rate utility fund, like enterprise fund department, which means only 1% of our overall like $450 million operating budget, only 1% of it is part of what's called the general fund. The general fund is that citywide fund that is being that has revenue sources based on sales tax and property tax revenues and all those different revenues that are coming in. Those are that are wide ranging and kind of like citywide. Those are what's supporting the general fund, but that general fund is only like literally 1% of our overall budget. The rest of our funds are what are called rate utility enterprise funds, and they are specifically geared to whatever utility service that we're providing in the department. So we talked about this a little bit in our first training a couple weeks ago, but I'm going to bring it up just here again at a high level. So we have several funds, and each of them have a specific function. So for example, Fund 423 is our IWM fund. So like Riley uses Fund 423. He's actually budgeted out of Fund 423. And what Fund 423 means is that when maybe you as residents of San Jose pay your garbage bill or pay your recycling bill, those monies come directly into Fund 423. And so they are utility rate funded funds. And so they are not part of the overall like general fund from like all these different things. Like we set our own rates that we send out to the customer, and then they have to pay to be able to support our services. And all of the money that is being used in those funds has to be used for those services. And the way that we build all those source and uses and all those documents is all part of that budget 101B training. So again, if you want to see that training, please let us know and we can send it out to you. But that's kind of the point of our funds, is to be able to be very specific to the scope of services that we're providing. So clearance accounts, where clearance accounts plays in, is they are interdepartmental for the most part, which means that when people want to use our funds for something and they want to charge us for something, we do not hand out our utility rate funds, our VIS codes, because we want to keep those protected. We want to keep them private. Because let's just say that someone did some work for Riley that was like someone that was outside ESD, and they were like, hey, I want to charge ESD for these services, and then and they asked Riley for a VIS code, and then he gives them a VIS code. They charge for the services, but then let's say, that they accidentally charge against that VIS code, months down the line when they're not doing anything for ESD. That becomes a problem, right? There's something called Proposition 218, which specifically states that, utility funds can only be used for the services that they are supporting. And so if there's ever, charges outside those services, that can really be a problem for our funds. And so the interdepartmental clearance accounts, the purpose of them is really to ensure that the sanctity of the utility funds stays secure, and that they don't be used for things outside of what we say they should be used for. And so the main clearance account is in that general fund. It's Fund 001. And each department that uses the clearance accounts has their own specific VIS code. Again, if you took the previous training, you would know what an RC is. An RC is called a responsibility center. They all have the same responsibility center. Each clearance account has the same responsibility center, which is 760-995. But the department number for each of those VIS codes is different. So if someone from PW wanted to, do something for Riley, he would give them the interdepartmental clearance account specifically for PW. So it'd be 00157760995. And what they would have to do would be then to like write in the comments what they were using our interdepartmental clearance account for. And so they would say, I'm doing IWM work for Riley Knight. And they would put that in the comments, and then we would see that on their time cards. And then what we would do, so once they do that, so now we're going from purpose to process. Once they do that, what we do is we take that money that's been charged against that interdepartmental clearance account viz code, and we move it over to where it's supposed to be. So then like Riley's team, they have a specific viz code. So we would move that money based on their comments that they did it for Riley and IWM. And then we would move the money over there through something called a cash journal voucher. So as you can imagine, this is a pretty tedious process because you have so many people that are like, interacting and collaborating with ESD. And so you have a lot of these charges that are just coming in from outside of the department that we then have to identify, and we have to move them over to the correct place. It's one of our processes. And the reason we're sharing it in this training is so that you can understand the lengths that we go through to make sure that our utility viz codes are protected. It's so important. And that's why we have this. Now, the interesting thing is you do have clearance accounts within utility funds. So for example, 513 or 423 also has their own internal clearance accounts, and those aren't used as much. Those are more like internal program accounts. And a lot of times, because it's like people within ESD, we can just tell them the correct viz code within our program, and then they can go charge to it. But every now and then we do need to actually charge directly to one of our utility rates. It's a specialized thing that happens, and it's someone outside of ESD, and so we use the utility rate clearance accounts to do that. But for the most part, all of our interdepartmental clearance accounts go directly to this general fund clearance account. And so then the way we do it is we identify where all those charges need to go based on the comments. And then we create something called a cash journal voucher script, which basically tells FMS, our financial management system, to move the money from this one viz code, which is the interdepartmental clearance account, to the new correct viz code, which is the program that it should have been charging to from the beginning. Again, it's part of a protection process. And if you have any questions on like the why of that or want to like understand that further, please feel free to reach out and we can kind of dive into that a little more. But that is kind of the overall purpose and process of the interdepartmental clearance accounts. And now brace yourselves because I'm going to show you kind of an example of like what our analysis for these things look like. And it's pretty busy spreadsheet, but here you go. So this is what it looks like. This is, like we have the department number over here. This is Department 51 is DOT. And they have all these different comments. This one person, this is the ID of that person. They did all these different things. And we had to identify based on these comments kind of what viz code to track them to. Now, the cool part about this one, a lot of them were Muni Water, overtime Muni Water stuff. And so we were able to kind of quickly identify them. But again, it can get really granular really fast. And once we identify them, we have to see the actual amounts that are being charged to that interdepartmental clearing accounts, and then move them to these viz codes through a cash journal voucher. So that is interdepartmental clearance accounts. And again, I want to really clarify that we're not doing this because it is like it's nitpicking. It's not nitpicking. It's more legal than it is anything. It is a process, and really, Beverly is our queen ping over here in terms of getting this thing done. She does a fantastic job, and she does it every quarter. Every quarter she goes in and she does clearance accounts, and she does a really good job of them. And it's very like granular detailed, and you really have to have a very keen eye for some of these things. But she'll do that every single quarter for the department. And she's doing it because it is part of our legal obligation, according to Proposition 218, to comply with that that limitation of our utility rates, that we cannot use them for services outside of what they're portioned to be used for. And so, again, going back to the example, let's say that like that person that charged for Riley's team just continued to accidentally charge that code over years, right? All of a sudden, we could have like hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in our utility funds that have nothing to do with ESD. That can really be problematic. And if we were to come under audit, which we are always under audit, we would find ourselves kind of up a creek without a paddle pretty quickly and having to figure out kind of what exactly went wrong when doing that. So that's why we have our interdepartmental clearance accounts for services outside ESD, where we cannot give our internal viz codes. So we supply them a temporary holding place viz code so that we can then JV the charges later. So that was a fire hydrant training of information with a lot of really granular details. And I'm so grateful for your patience and willingness to be a part of this training. I know it's a very heavy technical training, but I wanted to open up to questions and any wrap-up thoughts that you guys wanted to share you had. Please feel free to come off mic and discuss with us. Or even raise your hands. And Gabriel, I would like to keep recording right now. Don't stop, so we can kind of record the questions as well. I think they're good.
Sanjay, this is Lorenzo.
Hey, what's up, Lorenzo?
Hey, sorry, I did not quite hear exactly. If we wanted a budget tracker, who should we approach?
For you, you can approach you're at
Jenna?
yeah,
I'm at
Jenna, correct.
RWF. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, approach Jenna. Yeah. And that one that you were looking at, she sends that out. You're on that email that she sends it out for every month. So you can look back in your emails from her and you should be able to find it. It's at a specific place on the WPCP NAS drive.
Okay.
And
The
you
one
can
with
find
the
it very quickly.
AAA or something like that.
Correct,
right?
exactly. The budget reports folder.
Got
exactly.
it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That was a nice low-hanging fruit question, Lorenzo. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Anyone
somebody
else?
came to my office, so I wasn't able to.
Oh,
listen.
yeah, no worries.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Awesome. I am super glad to be able to give you back 45 minutes of your time. I know we signed up for a full 2 hours. We blew through this really fastly. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I really hope you appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any other further thoughts or questions. Have a good day.
Thank you. That was a good training.